Welcome to I Said What I Said, a sports podcast giving you opinions not heard anywhere else. I'm your host, Brad Wakai, alongside my co-host, Tyson Gentry. And for those watching on YouTube today, you can see that we got a special guest joining us. We have Davey Segal, the host and producer of SiriusXM NASCAR Radio with us today to talk NASCAR. Now, we got a bunch of good stuff here, and we'll get into it because Davey went viral on social media for an incident that happened on the track. So this is going to be fun to touch base on. But Davey, first of all, thanks for joining us, and we're excited to talk a little bit NASCAR with you.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me. Always pleasure to talk shop with some boys about some race cars on the racetrack. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, again, thank you so much. But I have to get this one out of the way immediately. When I was doing my research on you and I went to your website, it lists that you ate 21 mini soft shell tacos during a halftime eating contest, which is pretty awesome. But I want to know, what do you think is the more impressive athletic achievement? 21 mini tacos in a time period, or Richard Petty's 200 career victories?
Well, considering I share a birthday with the king, I don't want to upset him. So I'll probably go ahead and say his 200 wins. But I will say, you did your research. Very good on you for that. I really desperately need to update my website. That stat is true, and it always will be true. But there's some other things on my website under the strange true facts tab that are no longer true, but still strange. Like, I have now attended a concert. I have now been to a wedding, many weddings. I have now, unfortunately, been to a funeral. But, like, there was all these weird things that I hadn't done or experienced when I made my website, which is years ago. So thank you for the reminder. I have a note in my computer to update it, and I really need to get on that. So thanks.
Anytime. You're welcome. And what was the size of these tacos? Are you getting sauce? What does the next day look like for somebody after 21 of those things?
I will say, I was like a mini taco, like 7-Eleven, you get like those like mini hard tacos. It's like kind of that size. It was a halftime contest at a Michigan State basketball game, and my adrenaline was pumping. It was flowing. Tacos were going down. I almost choked on them. People thought that I puked them up afterwards because like I was choking, like could not breathe. And this dude like hit me on the hip, brought a trash can over, and I just like spit them out because I could not breathe. And then 18,000 people collectively just said, "Oh," and they thought I puked it up, which I didn't. I think we won that game, and can't make it up. I was starving the second half. I think I got myself like a personal pizza because most of the tacos didn't go down. So my buddy Ryan Cole, who was a section leader in the ISON, the student section with me, I think I told him that I was still starving, and he thought that I was joking, and I was not. So I got myself a personal pizza, and I think I ate that in the second half at some point. Next day, I don't really remember what that looked like, but I do remember that for winning that contest, I got a free platter of tacos every week for a year at this bar in East Lansing, and I didn't even use it once. And my friends still give me crap about that to this day.
Wow.
Rightfully so.
That's a great story. I mean, you got to love the college metabolism, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have it now. I didn't have it then, and I don't really have it now. That's why I look the way I look. But hey, makes for a good story.
Absolutely. So let's get a little bit into your background. How did you get into NASCAR, and why NASCAR? Was it always something you grew up with? Tell us a little bit about that.
So long story short is my dad liked racing when he was around, my age, a little bit younger in college. And then when I came into the picture, he just kind of always had it on. He was always going to races. I just kind of absorbed it by osmosis, I guess. And then it kind of just blossomed into an unhealthy obsession from there. And then at some point I decided that I wanted to maybe try to make a career out of it. I wanted to be a race car driver, kind of like any young kid. Realized that probably was not going to happen living in a suburb of Washington, D.C., where, believe it or not, boys, not really a racing hotbed, not much going on over here. So I think it was like Mother's Day one year. My mom suggested that I should start writing about it because I'm a good writer. I was in like middle school, maybe early high school at this point. So I did. I was pretty bad at it from what I remember, and then wound up going to school for journalism, started focusing on that, started up the NASCAR department at the student-led radio station at MSU, started doing a podcast, started talking on the radio about it, wrote a little bit more, experienced with some on-camera stuff. And then one thing led to another. Had an internship at a local radio station here in D.C., same with the TV station, freelance for NASCAR, and one thing leads to another. And here we are, trying to make a name for myself still, but got a full-time job in the sport. So don't quit your day job, kids. Dreams do come true. Isn't that what you're supposed to say? something like that.
Just grind. That's what that sounds like to
Yeah,
me, and
grind it out.
that's a good example there. And like with getting into the sport and getting into the content creation side of it, like can you speak a little bit on like what things in NASCAR allow you to get into like storytelling mode? I mean, I think a lot of our audience, they see the viral clips that hit Instagram every now and then, but they're not like up to speed necessarily on like all the big personalities and the giant events and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say NASCAR, I'm kind of biased because it's my favorite sport. It's what I've loved my whole life, and I work in it now. But bang for your buck, I mean, as a media member, you get pretty much unparalleled access to the stars, right? I mean, if you want to go talk to Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Larson, any of these guys, or their crew chiefs, or their team owners, if you see them, you got a media pass, they're fair game. You can go ahead and do it. Now, sometimes you might want to use your best judgment, like on Sunday at Sonoma, if you want to talk to Kyle Busch after he got wrecked by Ross Chastain and ran out of fuel, and second week in a row something bad happened to him, knowing Kyle Busch might not want to ambush him and talk to him. But for the most part, these guys and girls are really, really approachable, and they're understanding of, how things work in the sport, right? I mean, I don't have to tell you guys, I'm sure, but NASCAR at one point was booming, going all the way up, wound up crashing a little bit and went on the downturn. I think it's kind of back on that upward trajectory now. And most people in the sport, whether you're a driver, crew chief, engineer, owner, what have you, they kind of understand the game a little bit, and they know that they got to give a little to get a little, and they know that all coverage is good coverage for the most part. So, it's a really good time, in my opinion, to be on the media side and working in NASCAR, because there's a ton of great personalities that really are not afraid to speak their minds. There's a ton of great things happening in the sport. I mean, this week we're going to Iowa. First time that the Cup Series has been there ever. And this is something that's becoming commonplace, which is a great thing. NASCAR trying new things, going new places, reaching new and different audiences. So again, I'm biased, and I haven't really covered extensive other professional sports the way that I have with motorsports and NASCAR, but you can't really get much better, man. You can get pretty much anything you want within reason if you have a normal head about you, if you're in the media center, working in the infield or in the press box. It's great.
Yeah, and speaking of Kyle Busch, I mean, you were involved virally with the fight that he had in the pit. And so if you're not following Davey, you got to check him out. Davey Center, he posts a ton of great NASCAR content. And his profile picture now is him getting flattened and just this melee that was involved. And in the video that went viral on social media, he was involved in this tussle. Talk us through that. Like, what was going on? What was going through your mind? And just kind of being boots on the ground, what was that experience like?
It was a whirlwind. It really was. So we're at North Wilkesboro, obviously. I knew that Kyle was pissed. Ricky was pissed. We knew that Ricky couldn't leave because there's one way in North Wilkesboro. There's one way out. And he wasn't getting out until the race was over. And I was scanning the 8-car radio after the race because Joey had him covered, led every lap but one. So I wanted to hear what other people were saying. So I was listening to the 8-car radio, and Randall Burnett, Kyle's crew chief, said, you might have a visitor waiting for you at the trailer when you get back there. And Kyle didn't say anything. So all the beat reporters in the media center, they go to pit road. Usually they go down towards like the second, third, fourth, and fifth place finishers because that's where NASCAR kind of stages them. It's kind of inside baseball to do some media rounds and a media bullpen of sorts. But a lot of people went straight to Kyle because the race was kind of and they knew that was going to be a little juicy because we know how Kyle is after races with a potential altercation looming. So I was a part of the media corps that was kind of walking with him to his trailer. Bob Pockris of Fox Sports, Jordan Bianchi of The Athletic, they were kind of asking him a couple questions. I was just kind of trying to figure out my footing, whether to film horizontally, vertically, whatever. And by the time I figured out my footing and we were getting towards his hauler, I could just saw, like out of the corner of my eye, just a dude chilling there on the lift gate, and it's Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And it just kind of happened. Like, you position yourself somewhere where you want to get a good shot of what's going on. So I feel like I did that, got like some cinematic masterpiece fireworks going on in the background. And I was aware that something was about to go down. I didn't know if it was going to come to blows. I didn't know if it was going to become a huge backyard brawl type thing, but I had never been in like a fight like that in the workplace, I guess you can say, before. So when Ricky kind of started moving before he threw the punch, I was like, all right, like we're about to go. So I was kind of starting to brace myself, like starting to maybe trying to look around, see who was around me. And before I could even do that, there was a crew member that came, I think, from my right side, hit my elbow inadvertently, which ironically stopped my recording of the video. So the video stops right after Kyle gets nailed in the face. Then I'm still like filming, or so I thought. I guess what happened is I tripped over a tire. I still don't know because there's not really a good angle, but I think I tripped over a tire. That's lesson 1 learned. Don't position yourself in front or behind a tire. So I hit the deck. I'm like, that's embarrassing. Then Kyle sits in my lap, also hits the deck. And I wasn't clear at that point that it was Kyle until afterwards. And I got up and I was kind of like, oh, that kind of hurt. But I remember seeing black and red on the fire suit. And I looked around and everybody on Kyle's team was wearing blue and orange. And the only person wearing black and red was Kyle. So I was like, did Kyle Busch just fall in my lap? Literally. And after I got up and, the brawl was done, a couple my friends were like, you good? So you fell down? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Realized I was bleeding a little bit on my elbow, which is mostly, the soreness is mostly gone now. But then my phone started blowing up and I just still had to do a job for Sirius on pit road. And people are calling me, texting me. I'm trying to take video on my phone for Sirius. I'm like, everybody just relax. And then I got to Victory Lane and people are like, are you good? And I said, what what's going on? What happened? And they showed me the video that I was clearly in and Kyle just fell on me. But that was an experience that I had not experienced before. I hesitate to say that I'd like to experience it again, but it certainly was a unique moment. And I think next time I'm at the track, I may try to get that picture printed out, framed, and I may try to get Kyle to sign it or something just for the memories. That was certainly interesting.
I think that's fantastic. As somebody without a Twitter myself, I think your video is perfect. Like that's when it cuts off right there. That was like everything I needed to see, and then I have to go do the digging to kind of see the aftermath there.
Well, you're
so
very smart for not having Twitter because it usually is a cesspool of bad things. So good on you for not having one.
Yeah, I found other vices. Don't you worry about me at all. With my next question here, and kind of like you touched on it a little bit, but like you're covering so many different things at these events, right? Like how do you necessarily prioritize like what gets thrown onto a live blog, what story is going to come out, what are you going to be speaking on at the next podcast kind of deal? Because over a couple hundred laps and all of the other things that are going on, I'm sure there's 70 different ideas that are kind of popping into your head.
Yeah, it kind of depends. I mean, just like any other sport, right? There's ebbs and flows of the game or the race, and there's different storylines that emerge. And then, so-and-so is going to win. Well, they're out of fuel or they crash. You got to talk to them. You got to see what they have to say. If they got anything spicy to say, then that's obviously going to be interesting. If they're kind of meh about it, well, that's one thing. But then you got to look at where they are on the point standings. Do they have a win? You got to look at big picture when it comes to that stuff. But I'll take, Sonoma, for example, this past weekend. I wasn't out there. But if I was, my job primarily post-race usually is to follow whoever is gathering our audio and our post-race interviews and film the interviews to then clip them on social, post them, schedule, disseminate them out on our social media account and our channel handles. It's tough to say. So what I'm thinking is like, okay, so-and-so finished second. What are some stats involved in this person's finish that I can kind of relay to the host that's conducting the interview? What's a caption that I can make once the video is edited that may catch the person's eye a little bit more, that may grab their attention while also being fair to everybody involved, obviously. And also, things happen outside of the top 5 that you may not be able to chase quite literally, but you have to have in the back of your mind, right? Martin Truex Jr. runs out of fuel in the last lap, creeping and crawling across the start-finish line, crowd going crazy. That's interesting, right? And it also is kind of unfortunate for him because he's yet to win. We don't know if it's going to be his last year. We still are kind of TBD on that. And it's the second week in a row that he's had a fast car, but not a real great result to show for it. So you got to just keep all these things kind of going in your mind. To your point, Tyson, I mean, there can be 2 things going on at once. There can be 22 and there can be 72. It just kind of depends on the race. But the more things going on, the more things that are swirling around in this cranium, the better, because that means we got a lot to talk about.
The interesting thing, so I got into NASCAR, like I'm really following it like a couple years ago, and a lot of it had to do with placing wagers and trying to hit outrights and, anything that kind of sports betting can present. But so what I found with these new next gen cars, and maybe I'll get your opinion on that in a little bit though, but like the playing field feels much more even. And I think that was kind of the idea behind these next gen cars, right? Like kind of go into another auto sport, F1, it's all about the engineering, and it's really gotten boring where, you just know Max Verstappen and Red Bull are going to win every week. That's not the case with NASCAR. And I keep telling like my friends who are F1 guys, I'm like, if you want to watch good racing, you got to come to NASCAR, because every single week, the people who have the fastest cars, they're not always the ones winning. Like, you got to be able to drive these things. I guess your thought on if you like the new next gen, if you like the idea behind that, and just where we are as a NASCAR in this new era.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything you said there. I have this conversation with so many of my buddies that, again, are from the DC area, not a motorsports or racing hotbed, but F1, as I'm sure you guys know, has been really hot in the streets the last few years. And everybody's coming up to me at these social gatherings and they're like, hey, I know you do NASCAR and you always have, but do you do F1 too? And I'm like, well, I don't really cover it, but I've watched it longer than you because I wasn't a bandwagon fan. And oh, by the way, NASCAR is better because it's actually competitive and it's unpredictable. So if you want to watch some real racing and some good stuff, turn on Sunday afternoons instead of Sunday mornings most of the time, which they say, whatever, it's just turning left, going in circles, which if that's their mindset, then it's hard to convince them. But you get my point, right? You're totally right. I mean, I was a bit skeptical of the Gen 7 next gen platform when it was kind of announced, because in essence, it's essentially a spec series, which is similar to what IROC was back in the day. SRX had its moment in the sun, and what IndyCar in some ways kind of is now, right? But we saw in the first year, there were more than 16 winners throughout the 36 race season, which was a bit unprecedented. You saw last year, the good drivers and the good teams win a little bit more and close that gap. And you're seeing that even more this year with Hendrick dominating, Gibbs dominating, Larson, Hamlin, all those guys, Byron, that are winning races in bunches because those are the best drivers with some of the best crew chiefs, some of the best teams. And when you're really good, you're going to beat the other people that are just not as good as you. And I think it comes down to just the fact that, yes, the next gen platform has leveled the playing field for sure. That's why you see guys like Michael McDowell winning at Indianapolis last year, finishing second over the weekend. His teammate, Todd Gilliland, who's impressing a lot as he gets more races under his Cup Series belt. Shane Van Gisbergen coming in last year, coming to Chicago somewhere and something that NASCAR's never been or done, and winning in his first ever start. I mean, that means that the playing field is at a point where somebody can literally come in from all the way, literally across the world, hop in something that he's never been in, and whoop everybody else in the field that is supposedly, and I think they are, the best in the world at what they do. That's incredible. And the fact that we have that really speaks to what NASCAR has built, which is, I think, the top form of North American motorsports from a competition standpoint, from an engineering standpoint, and from a diversity standpoint, too. Not this year because they got rid of dirt, but for the last couple of years, you've had short tracks, intermediates, super speedways, road courses, street courses, and dirt at the Cup Series level. There is no other schedule, I think, in the world that has as diverse of a schedule as that. And you take dirt off this year, you still got a really, really diverse slew of tracks that I think NASCAR races on. So when you combine that with the talent level right now in the Cup Series, with the technology advancements that are coming in at a rapid pace, and the level playing field, to your point, Brad, I think the Cup Series specifically is in a really good spot right now. But I do still think that the best drivers and teams are going to continue to kind of separate themselves from the pack. That's what we've seen so far in 2024. And with 10 races or so to go before the playoffs, I don't think that's going to change.
We need somebody. We'll clip that and we got to send that to you, because that was a promo. I think that you could put anywhere to get people into NASCAR. And kind of along those lines, like as we kind of get into this push here towards the end of the season, is there anything for somebody who might listen to this and say, "Oh, I'm going to check out the next one"? Like any words of wisdom or something that they should be looking out for?
Well, I guess I could start with this weekend at Iowa. Again, it's somewhere that the Cup Series has never been. It's a place that has been very, very hungry for NASCAR racing. You know, the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series, ARCA, K&N, they had raced at Iowa over the last decade and a half or so, but Cup had never been there. And IndyCar has been there the last several years, and they've really, really put a lot of money into that event. Hy-Vee specifically as a sponsor has. They've had huge names as people that are performing there for concerts. Carrie Underwood, I think, was there last year. Ed Sheeran was there last year. Like, they're big, big names. And NASCAR I think they're not even trending. I think they officially have sold out the Cup race, the Xfinity race, and I think even the ARCA race is on track for a sellout, which is really, really telling. So I'd start this weekend in the land of corn, right? I mean, you don't think of Iowa as being a hotbed of motorsports or a destination of sorts, but it is exactly that this weekend for NASCAR. And coming up in a few weeks, Chicago, the second annual Chicago Street Race. That's something that if you haven't seen it before, you are going to want to tune in, because that's something that is really, really unique about the sport. Racing on the streets of a downtown metropolis. That's really, really cool to see. And I was there last year for it. It was very memorable, and I'm looking forward to being there again this year. Plus the push to the playoffs. I mean, you got short tracks, intermediates, super speedways coming up in the playoffs, and some more road courses as well besides Chicago. So again, the diversity aspect of it. There are so many racetracks that can kind of suit and tickle your fancy as you see fit. So there's a lot to be excited about for sure, especially in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I thought the Chicago race was just awesome. Like seeing these cars being in like a city like Chicago, you get that the F1 thing, but the cars look so much different. This is like, oh, this is actually like what we drive, but they're going way faster and they're way better drivers. I thought that was cool. In terms of where we're at now, Kyle Larson's leading the Cup Series right now. Chase Elliott's second, based on what I'm looking at here in the standings. Denny Hamlin third. Tyler Reddick actually up to fourth. Martin Truex Jr. rounding out your five. Ryan Blaney, not quite the same year he had last year when he won. He's down in 12th. Anybody that you think is going to win this thing? I mean, Larson, it feels like every single week he's at the top. Is that the favorite if you're looking at here for who's going to hoist this thing?
Yeah, I think he has to be. He is up there. Denny should be in the same breath, in the same conversation. I think William Byron, he may have had a quiet last several weeks, but you can't count him out. And, I wouldn't look too far past those guys, just because the way that the NASCAR playoff format is set up, it's just so reliant on what have you done for me lately, right? I mean, Ryan Blaney had a very good, solid, pedestrian regular season, good, solid, pedestrian start to the playoffs. He wins at Talladega, advances himself to the next round. He runs really well at Homestead, wins at Martinsville, and finishes second at Phoenix, and boom, he's the champ, right? So it's all about getting hot at the right time. And Ryan himself said that last year, kind of like any other sport in any postseason, right? I mean, the Panthers right now, Stanley Cup Game 2 is tonight as of this recording. Sergei Bobrovsky's hot. He's standing on his head, as they say, right? So, I mean, you get a hot goalie in the Stanley Cup playoffs, you can ride that goalie all the way to hoisting the cup. I think the same thing with the NBA right now. Like, Luka's really good for the Mavs, but he doesn't have that great of a supporting cast. Whereas the Celtics are just a really, really good team, top to bottom. And Drew Holiday is kind of coming out of nowhere. And right now, if the finals ended, he'd probably be your MVP. And all season long, it's been Tatum and Brown, with Porzingis being injured, but he was another big piece too. So, last year you could look at William Byron and you could look at Denny Hamlin as being kind of the MVPs and the favorites of the regular season and most of the playoffs. But kind of like what happened to Denny this weekend at Sonoma, no fault of his own, blows an engine on lap 2. Last year at Homestead, he had an issue inside the car that was mechanical, no fault of his own, hits the wall, DNFs. That put him in essentially a must-win position going to Martinsville. Couldn't get it done because Ryan Blaney did, and he doesn't make the championship 4, so he's not eligible for the title, but he had one of, if not the best seasons of his really long, illustrious Hall of Fame career. So even though Larson, Hamlin, and Byron right now are probably your betting favorites, and rightfully so, to win the title, get back with me when we're in the playoffs and we're kind of in the thick of it, and when we're closer to Phoenix in the championship race, just because there is so much that can and will, I'm sure of it, change between now and then. Guys are going to win. Guys are going to get hot. Guys are going to go on cold streaks. There's going to be an upset in one of the first couple rounds of the postseason. I had Ryan Blaney out in the first round last year. Dude won it all. So that shows what I know, and that shows how unpredictable things can be as we go through the year.
Yeah, that's
Brad,
awesome.
Does that sound right to you? A Michigan State guy talking about getting hot at the right time?
Oh, geez. I mean, that's just what he lived on, right? For 4 years.
I just had to sneak in a little. Brad's a Penn State alumnus. I had to sneak in a little Big Ten rival. I'm an FCS school guy, so I can't actually fit into this thing with you guys. So I'm just going to antagonize as best I can.
We haven't been too great lately, though. We need to pick it up. We got a new coach for football this year. Izzo's got a couple more good years left in him, I'd hope. So never say never, but I'm cautiously optimistic about my Spartans.
Every time it gets to March, you can't count out the Izzo love there. So
yeah.
I mean, we do on this podcast, we do, and I apologize for that. I'm out of pretty much like my serious ones. What is your favorite racing movie of all time? This is something I did want to ask.
Ooh, is it bad if I say Cars?
Absolutely not. That was a
Cars
movie in
awesome.
my head, and that's what I was hoping you were going to say.
Because that is a cinematic masterpiece.
Yes.
I was going to call my girlfriend, my fiance. She hates that I love it. I think Lightning McQueen is like everybody's spirit animal. So is Mater. Like Lightning and Sally is a love story that is so underappreciated. I love that movie. I love that trilogy. I don't love the second movie. I just kind of skip over it. But Cars 1, elite. Cars 3, elite. Has a lot of real life NASCAR storylines. Like when Lightning goes and runs on that dirt track, that's legit. When they go into that bar, and I don't remember the names of the characters, but they're based on and voiced by real NASCAR legends. Wendell Scott, one of the characters, is based off of him, the first black driver to win in NASCAR. One's based off Janet Guthrie, one of the first women to race in NASCAR. Cruz Ramirez, we got the feminine aspect in there. Girl power, hell yeah, she's a girl boss. Cars 3, elite. Cars 1's great too. If we're talking about real life actors and real life people, Days of Thunder is really, really good too. Again, my fiance not a fan of that, which we got to work on it.
That hurts.
And I don't think Talladega Nights gets enough love. It gets a lot of hate because it's like, oh, that's feeding into the stereotype. That's not how NASCAR life is. Well, I don't care. I think it's hilarious. So I like Talladega Nights as well. And I'm a big Sacha Baron Cohen guy. So I don't know. I would say to answer your question, Cars. But that's not necessarily like a NASCAR movie, but it is a racing movie. So I'll say Cars.
All three that I had in my head, you just boom, boom, boom down the list. That was impressive. Yeah. That's a true racing guy right there, folks.
Rush is really good too with Chris Hemsworth in that one. Like that's like a really good like actual cinematic masterpiece. But Cars elite in my mind. Has to be.
Yeah, I'll share a little embarrassing story, but I think it was funny. We were at a bachelor party in Puerto Rico, and kind of between stuff, if we're getting out to go and do whatever, we just threw Cars on in the background. And one time we just didn't even go out and do what we wanted because we just got hooked in Cars. So
you turn that movie on, you're not going anywhere for at least
you're not going anywhere
because you got to debrief after watching it for like the 30th time and be like, "Wait, I didn't know about this storyline," or "What? Did you see this?" Yeah, I mean, if you turn Cars on, you're not moving. Doesn't matter what time it is, what day it is, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah, ka-chow became the catchphrase of the bachelor party.
As it should. As it should.
A couple more for me here. And did want to point out, just going back to it, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson are your favorites for the Cup Series. Sounds like there could be, some people with longer shots that you can kind of turn to here. But I'm interested in the Iowa thing this weekend, and there's not odds out, kind of takes for qualifiers. But I believe the calendar and the broadcast is this switching to NBC now. Like it's done on Fox, it's going to NBC. You got your Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s. As somebody who's in the business, like what do you see that's different between how Fox covers it and how NBC covers it?
I will say Fox gets a lot of hate from, it seems like a lot of people on Twitter, which Tyson, you wouldn't know about. But I don't think a lot of it is justified, to be honest with you. Like coming from somebody who has worked in sports television on a very, very smaller scale compared to a major sports broadcast on a major property like that. So I'm not trying to compare the two whatsoever, but it's difficult. It's really hard to make sports TV live happen. And a lot of things that Fox gets criticized for, I think some are justifiable. Some people are just nitpicking and trying to just dig that hole a little bit deeper. I will say, though, NBC and Fox both do a really good job of analyzing the strategy aspects to things. Larry McReynolds, he's my coworker. I work with him almost every day on SiriusXM. But when they put him on the air on Fox, I listen to every single word that man says because he knows more about racing. He has more knowledge in his fingertip than I will have in my entire life. And he still keeps up with it today. Like he hasn't crew chief competitively in Cup for, I don't know, a couple decades maybe, but he still has the pulse on everything. So I really value his input. Kevin Harvick was my guy growing up. Now to see him in the booth, I think he's added something really nice to the Fox trio with him, Mike Joy, who's an absolute legend, and Clint Boyer. And he and Kevin have a really good relationship there, and they rib each other, and it's fun to listen to. And NBC, the calendar turning to their side of things as well. It's going to be interesting because you mentioned Dale Jr. This is going to be an unexpected change, but no Dale Jr. this year for NBC because his contract was up. They didn't renew him, and he signed with Prime Video and TNT Sports for next year's new television deal that takes effect. So we're not going to get any slide jobs or, we got a car on the wall. We're going to get none of that this year, which I think is honestly a big, big loss. But NBC's got a ton of good people too. I mentioned Larry Mack for Fox. Steve Letarte kind of fills that role for NBC as the crew chief guy. Jeff Burton's got some great perspective and still has his finger on the pulse of things, helping lead the Drivers Advisory Council. So he has relationships with a lot of current top-tier drivers, and obviously his son Harrison Burton still running full-time in the Cup Series. Lee Diffie is going to call play-by-play for, I think, every race after the Olympic break when Rick Allen is going to do the first few and Lee Diffie is going to take over after. So I love accents, so that's a big win for us. And he's also great at what he does. His last lap call, the Indy 500 this year with Pato O'Ward and Joseph Newgarden, still gives me chills just thinking about it. So they got a lot of good stuff cooking on NBC and the Big Bird for this coming summer and fall. And just one real quick thing about Fox as well, guys. It's kind of sad this week because Race Hub, they're going to have their last ever show this week. A lot of really good people behind the scenes. Again, TV is like a team sport. There's a lot of people that you don't see that when you're talking all this, on social media, these people kind of feel the brunt of it. But there's so many good people behind the scenes that I've gotten the pleasure of meeting, knowing, and becoming friends with over the years that unfortunately are going to be out of work at the end of this week, given that Fox's coverage of Cup and Xfinity this year is done. They're still going to broadcast all the truck races on FS1 for the rest of the year, but just kind of a really unfortunate and disappointing time for them right now. So thinking of everybody there, but hoping that they can go out with a bang with their final Race Hub and that everybody lands on their feet. It's weird too, because like Stuart Haas is closing at the end of the year. Those 4 drivers are going to be looking for work. Those 4 crew chiefs are going to be looking for work, but there are quite literally hundreds of other employees that are going to be looking for work. And those hundreds of employees have hundreds of family members. So that race shop closing literally impacts thousands of people. And same with Fox's NASCAR coverage ending and Race Hub coming to a close with their studio shows too. Just kind of an unfortunate reality of the biz. Sorry to be a downer, but
no, I mean, I love Race Hub. Like when I was like following NASCAR, getting into it, they like dumbed it down so much for me, but I'm sure for somebody like you who actually knows, like you can pick up on things, but it was a great show. So that's just unfortunate, kind of like the ever changing landscape of TV media rights. I mean, like Turner, everybody was freaking out because Inside the NBA might go away. That sounds like they got a package, but like you said, that's the reality. And Charles Barkley was talking about all the behind the scenes guys at Turner, like, hey, they could be out of work. Nobody thinks about that really, but yeah, I mean, that's always good to know. And you Twitter people out there, come on, let's reel it in a little bit. No need to make it accessible. Let's make it fun like it used to be.
Seriously, but, you sit your butt in a control room for 3-4 hours, 5, 6, 7 hours when there's a rain delay, and you push those buttons, then get back and talk to me. All right, come on now.
Exactly. Last one for me here. I can't have a NASCAR expert on without talking about my guy Ross Chastain, because he's my favorite driver now. I know people hate him, which makes me like him more. To be honest, like I feel like he's kind of viewed as an outsider, which makes me kind of jump on them as an outsider. I don't know if that's accurate. That's just kind of the vibes I get. It's funny because he can play into the role of being a villain, but he just tries to be the nice guy. I'm like, dude, just go heel, just go full heel turn and be the villain that everybody wants you to be and be the biggest star in the sport. Can you just go a little bit into Chastain, some of the biggest stars, who people should know, and just kind of where you see this progressing?
Well, I want to get your take since you're a Chastain guy. I mean, Denny has gone full heel. Now, Absolutely. It's a little bit different with him because Denny is one of the best drivers right now. He's a winner every single week. Like, he has his own podcast. He's not afraid to speak his mind. Ross a little bit different because he hasn't won in a little bit. Well, I shouldn't say a little bit. He won the season finale last year, but this year he hasn't won yet. Denny is a car owner, so he can kind of speak his mind there. He doesn't really have any repercussions because he's already said, like, all right, the worst thing that happens is Joe Gibbs fires me. What am I going to do? I'll drive for myself. So he has kind of like a baked-in backup plan. Ross doesn't. So I see his perspective there. Why do you think he hasn't gone full heel? Like, I'm curious from your perspective, being a fan of his and following him for him to get to where he's at now. What do you think's holding him back?
I think he just wants everybody to like him. he wants to be the people pleaser. And maybe that's just for that's, these guys closer because you're our boots on the ground. But for me, in the outside, the way he handles interviews or if something goes wrong, he's like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. I'm like, dude, just say I bashed him. Like he came into my lane and I sent him back. Like, just embrace it. But the Denny thing, he rubs me the wrong way. And I like heels, but like for some reason, he's just like too over the top sometimes for me. Where I'm like, dude, really? Like, come on.
I get that. And I think that's why a lot of people that like Denny love him so much, because they love that how pissed off it makes other people like you. And I feel like Ross fans are similar too, because Ross does this thing where he's so aggressive on the track and then he gets out, and I think he's kind of shying away from it a little bit. But last year and the year before, when he was in a spat, it seemed like almost every other week, he would be seeing red in the car, get out and say, oh, I just got to be better than that. I'm so sorry. It's all my guys. And
like, come on, dude.
I got to be better than that. And then we're like, all right, you're taking responsibility for it. Cool. Like you say, you got to be better. See what happens. Then he does the same stuff. And then he says, oh, yeah, I got to be better. It's like, stop talking about it and be about it, man. And I think it got to a point, too. It was Darlington last year when he and Larson wrecked, and Rick Hendrick came out and basically was like, somebody's got to get this kid under control. And I think, Justin Marks came on our air on Sirius and basically was like, I had to sit down with Ross. I talked to him. I think he's going to race a little bit different. And from that point forward, he was not the same driver in not a good way. Like, he was not as aggressive on track. He was not running up front as much. Still was solid, but you could tell something changed in him. I think anybody that drives a race car for a living and does it at this high of a level professionally, you got to have a few screws loose. And I think Ross definitely fits that mold, right? I mean, he's an 8th generation watermelon farmer. That's unique. He's a blue collar guy. I think a lot of old school fans kind of see a little bit of themselves in him, kind of just like a guy who just really likes to go fast and is just really good and has stumbled upon a good team with some good sponsors. And well, he's sponsored by Busch Beer. I love drinking Busch Light, and he's sponsored by Kubota. I drive a Kubota tractor on my land. You know what I mean? So I feel like he has a lot of appeal to kind of like the older fan that, I love Dale because Dale was up at 3 a.m. baling hay on his farm. And I feel like Ross Chastain does the same thing with watermelons. Like, that's a real thing. I know it sounds funny, but I've heard that from people. I've talked to people in person about that, and we've screened up people on Sirius that say similar things. So I think Ross is good for the sport, though, for sure. Like, in the same way that Denny has gone full heel, Ross has not gone there yet, and I think it's going to take a while, maybe not ever, for him to get there. But you cannot question his desire to win and his devotion to the team and his devotion to trying to get that one car ahead of anybody in front of him. He was racing his teammate, Daniel Suarez, really hard for a stage point this week, and Daniel even came over the radio and was like, what was that about? Like, what's his deal? And then obviously what happened on the last lap with Kyle Busch, a guy who also is very fiery. So Ross is a good dude to pick. He's becoming a fan favorite and a popular guy for a reason. So I think you picked a good one.
Well, Brown will be on him until he does turn full heel, and then he just will rub him the wrong way once.
Can't win.
David, this has been awesome. Just let the people listening know kind of what's next for you and where they can catch you.
Yeah, you can listen to me probably mostly every day on SiriusXM NASCAR radio, behind the board, pushing the buttons, chiming in as a producer most of the time. And then the show that I host, Loose Ends, usually airs over the weekend. Friday nights is usually a good barometer of when you can catch it. Sometimes it's at 7, sometimes it's at 6, sometimes it's at midnight. Just kind of depends what the racing schedule for that weekend is. But that kind of is a comprehensive best of show that kind of ties together the best from the week. So love hosting that show. Love getting to talk with everybody that calls in and that has an input to share. And also my personal podcast, Victory Lane. It's available on any podcast platform, including YouTube. So you can catch that every week. Got different interviews from people in the NASCAR world. Last week, I have Bono Mannion on the show, 2010 Daytona 500 winner, and he's currently Nick Sanchez's crew chief in the Truck Series. So got a lot of good things cooking on the podcast side of things. And Tyson, you won't be able to keep up, but Brad, you can follow me on Twitter at Davey Center as well, or X, whatever we're calling it. And maybe the next time I talk to you guys, I may or may not have an updated website. We'll see. I might have a
burner by that point. I'm gonna have to hop on the burner Twitter. I'll keep tweeting at you from other accounts every day, letting you know to update the website.
Well, yeah, like Tyson said, Davey, thanks so much for coming on. This is fantastic. I mean, sincerely, Tyson and I, we don't talk NASCAR really on here, but we wanted to get you on. I think there's a chance that NASCAR explodes and kind of takes on that, F1 kind of rocket ship or trajectory, especially if Netflix wants to do a documentary and kind of behind the scenes like F1 had. I think there's a real chance of that, and I hope
Well,
so.
do you know they
this
did?
is
They had
way
they had a season 1 out already. You should watch it if you.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I didn't know if that was out. Or so here's the thing: I share my Netflix with my family, and they kicked me out. So I'm one of those guys. So I haven't been on Netflix in like a year. So I need to catch up.
Get back on it and watch it. It's NASCAR Full Speed. Ross has a lot of cameos in there. They followed him around for a while. It's really good stuff. And again, like, I'm biased, but really good stuff. So I'd highly recommend it.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to have you on again, Davey, later in the season, if maybe before playoff time, because it's a new thing for us, and we can talk, like, maybe if there's a betting angle or something, and you want to give us a tip or anything that we can make a little cash.
For sure, I got you guys. I'll help you out. Say less.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Go follow him on the socials. Go listen to him on SiriusXM and his own podcast, and we will talk to you later, man. Thank you so much.
No problem, boys. Thanks for having me on.